Welcome to today's Explainer. Right now, we're taking all these complex, swirling headlines and really just distilling them down into exactly what you need to know. We're unpacking the massive macro trends that are completely defining our world today, and we're drawing it all straight from the June 1st, 2026 edition of the Daily Tech Reader. We're going to look at everything from the absolute explosion of artificial intelligence to shifting geopolitical sands and even the literal physical limits of human endurance. So let's start right here. This is the front page of the Daily Tech Reader from June 1st, 2026. It's really this perfect snapshot in time, and it's just packed with these totally interconnected global shifts. You know, when you look at these headlines together, they stop being these isolated random events, and they actually start telling a very clear, very compelling story about exactly where our world is heading this summer. And here is our roadmap for today. We've structured this explainer into 4 main chapters. First, we'll dive into the great AI paradox. Second, geopolitics and global tensions. Third, shifts in the workplace. And finally, culture, sports, and climate. Okay, let's kick things off with Chapter 1, the great AI paradox, covering enterprise triumphs and legal perils. So we are currently watching this absolutely massive juxtaposition play out in the AI sector right now. And the crucial starting point is this staggering number, $25 billion. That is OpenAI's newly crossed annualized revenue. They are taking early steps toward a public listing, potentially as soon as late 2026. And their rival, Anthropic, well, they aren't far behind. They're approaching an incredible $19 billion in annualized revenue, and they're filing their own preliminary IPO paperwork. Analysts are projecting that these combined listings could literally rival the largest technology IPOs in U.S. history. So if you've got an investment portfolio or a 401k, these impending listings are about to heavily reshape your financial world. But here is where the paradox really emerges. On one side of the scale, you have these record-shattering IPO valuations that are totally reshaping institutional investment portfolios. But on the exact opposite side, you have this intensely mounting legal pressure. There are now more than 20 active lawsuits filed against OpenAI over ChatGPT-related harms. This includes cases brought by families of shooting victims, suicide victims, and minors. And this legal escalation could heavily accelerate regulatory pressure, right as these companies enter their IPO windows. The specific catalyst driving today's legal news cycle is actually coming out of Florida. The state's attorney general has filed a first-in-the-nation civil lawsuit against OpenAI and its CEO, Sam Altman. The complaint alleges the company suppressed internal safety warnings and basically marketed ChatGPT as safe despite knowing the risks. The filing specifically cites high-profile tragedies including the FSU campus shooting, a school mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, Canada, and multiple suicide cases. Furthermore, it formally introduces the concepts of behavioral addiction and cognitive harm into U.S. litigation. And this really matters because it could set a massive legal precedent for exactly how AI is designed and moderated for vulnerable populations moving forward. Meanwhile, completely away from the courts, the actual technology is maturing fast. The defining buzzword at NVIDIA's GTC 2026 conference out in San Jose is agentic AI. Now, what does that mean? It represents a decisive shift away from benchmark competitions and demo culture. Instead of just flashy demos, companies are building task-specific systems to execute repeatable workflows across sales, support, administration. Basically, the AI is finally doing the boring paperwork for us. The industry has decisively moved past that initial proof-of-concept phase, and they're now building the core enterprise operating systems of the future. All right, moving on to Chapter 2, Geopolitics and Global Tensions, looking at AI's dual use and fractured alliances. Because, frontier technology doesn't just exist in boardrooms, right? It directly impacts global security. According to a recent Financial Times analysis, the very tools driving those massive IPO valuations, like ChatGPT and Gemini, are actively being used by Iranian actors. Security researchers are warning that these Western AI tools are actually helping develop malware and launch sophisticated phishing campaigns. It just perfectly illustrates the dual-use risks of these frontier AI systems, especially when we're in the middle of an active, highly fragile conflict. And honestly, that conflict is incredibly delicate right now. The fragile ceasefire arrangement between the U.S. and Iran, which, if you remember, was brokered by Pakistan back in April, is currently hanging by a thread. Both sides are actively trading accusations. Iran is accusing the U.S. and Israel of infractions, while Washington is completely dismissing those claims. For now, diplomatic backchannels remain the primary tool, keeping this whole thing from escalating into a full resumption of hostilities. And the messaging we're seeing from the respective leadership presents a really stark contrast. On one hand, an Iranian outlet linked to the Revolutionary Guard stated Tehran was suspending peace talks and literally threatening to open additional fronts. But on the flip side, President Trump countered on Truth Social, stating that indirect negotiations were continuing at a rapid pace and that all shooting between Israel and Hezbollah would stop. So it's a very complex diplomatic standoff that's being navigated in real time. As a result of all this, we are absolutely seeing clear economic fallout. With negotiations over the Strait of Hormuz stuck between tentative frameworks and pushback, global energy markets are totally on edge, and that's keeping fuel prices elevated. But interestingly, we're getting mixed signals in the broader economy. FedEx actually just issued an upward revision to its financial guidance. This signals that logistics and shipping demand is holding much steadier than people feared despite all the macro uncertainty and energy costs, which offers a pretty solid, modest positive indicator for the U.S. economy overall. Let's pivot to Chapter 3, Shifts in the Workplace, where we're tracking legal rollbacks and sidelined grads. We are tracking several major domestic policy and legal shifts today that directly alter American society. First up, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission is pursuing changes to roll back decades-old regulations under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. Critics are arguing this will weaken workplace discrimination protections that have literally stood since the 1960s. Over in the courts, a Utah judge ruled that the July preliminary hearing for Tyler Robinson, the suspect accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk, will be open to the public and media, denying defense requests for a restriction. And then, shifting gears to the business sector, Garner Health just closed a massive $100 million Series E, which really reflects the sustained investor appetite for data-driven workplace health AI platforms. But speaking of the workplace, let's address the absolute most common anxiety out there right now. Is artificial intelligence replacing new college graduates? I mean, we've all heard the dominant narrative, right? That automation is the primary culprit behind declining entry-level employment. Well, actually, according to brand new research from the New York Federal Reserve, the answer is a resounding no. The real culprit is remote work. The study found that companies are simply far less likely to hire recent college graduates into roles that can be done remotely. This insight really highlights how our assumptions about new technology often mask simpler, underlying structural shifts in human behavior and corporate management. And that brings us to our final segment, Chapter 4, Culture, Sports, and Climate, Humans Navigating the Extremes. In culture, the balance of power is officially flipping. A new analysis shows that films produced by or featuring major YouTube creators are consistently outperforming traditional studio productions at the box office. While June is still seeing a pretty strong theatrical slate headlined by Disney, Pixar, and A24, the overarching trend is this massive accelerated shift away from legacy talent and traditional distribution models. The creator economy, it's not niche anymore, it's the mainstream economy. And man, in the sports world, today is just packed with historic milestones. Serena Williams, at 44 years old, just became the most anticipated story in sports by announcing her return to professional tennis at the HSBC Championships in London. Stateside, Seattle Stadium has finalized its preparations for this month's massive 2026 FIFA World Cup, drawing all of that global attention right onto U.S. soil. In basketball, the Knicks are Vegas favorites as the NBA Finals tip off Wednesday. On the ice, Frederick Anderson has the Hurricanes just one single win away from the Stanley Cup. And in baseball, a really tough blow for the Reds as their electrifying shortstop Elly De La Cruz lands on the injured list with a hamstring strain. Okay, taking a breath here to look at our environment. It is the second day of the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season, and thankfully, it's opening very quietly. This is completely consistent with NOAA's forecast, driven by El Niño suppression. Down on the ground, legendary environmental advocate Aaron Brockovich is making headlines by launching a highly anticipated new legal campaign, mobilizing community action all over again. Meanwhile, the U.S. is experiencing this split weather pattern. We're seeing drought conditions improving in the Pacific Northwest, but they are stubbornly persisting across the Central Plains. And finally, guys, I want to end on a number that is truly breathtaking. 274. A new report documents that 274 climbers were simultaneously in Mount Everest's death zone during a single period this season. Safety experts are deeply concerned about this, noting that it sets an alarming new record that pushes the absolute physiological limits of the human body above 26,000 feet. Which brings us to the ultimate question for today. We've looked at the dizzying rise of AI and its legal battles, the fragility of global peace talks, shifting workplace dynamics, and humans literally pushing themselves to the absolute brink on top of the world. What you should take away from this explainer is that every single one of these threads is connected. And remember, this is just a snapshot of one single day. Between AI's rapid rise, geopolitical tensions, and our climate realities, what does the rest of 2026 hold for us?
Thank you so much for learning with me today, and keep questioning the headlines.